Midnight in California. A huge, crooked house rises out of the fog. Stairs that go nowhere. Doors that open into walls. Windows facing other windows. A maze in wood and glass. This is the dark story of America's most cursed mansion, the Winchester House. From the outside, it looks almost beautiful. A fairy tale palace with towers and porches and bright stained glass. But inside, every hallway feels wrong. Every step feels watched. And every nail was hammered in by a woman who believed that if she ever stopped building, she would die. Sarah Winchester, widow of the man who made a fortune selling the rifle that won the West. Her money came from a gun that killed tens of thousands. Spiritualists told her the ghosts of the dead were hunting her, so she started building this house as a shield. 24 hours a day. For 38 years, with no master plan, only fear, rooms sealed up and never opened again. Secret passages the servants refused to enter alone. Visitors who said they heard footsteps in empty hallways and voices calling their names. Was Sarah Winchester a mad woman trapped in her own grief? Or did she know something dark about this mansion that we are still too afraid to believe? If you enjoy deep investigations into Gilded Age architecture and the families who built it, please like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments which house to explore next. Your support makes these detailed stories possible. Chapter 1. The Woman Who Disappeared into Her Own House. The workers knew something was wrong. Morning after morning, they walked through the gates of the sprawling estate in San Jose, California. They picked up their tools, checked their instructions when there were any, and they built. Staircases, hallways, bedrooms, bathrooms, entire new wings rising in a matter of weeks. But they almost never saw the woman who paid them. Sarah Winchester stayed out of sight. She moved through the house like a shadow, leaving instructions on slips of paper, sending out cash payments through servants, sketching designs on scraps that made no architectural sense. A door 7 feet high, a staircase with steps only 2 inches tall, a window built into the floor. The men did not press her with questions. The work was steady. The pay arrived on time. And in the 1890s, during a period of economic panic and uncertainty, that was enough. But they talked among themselves. They whispered that she held seances at midnight in a room with 13 hooks on the wall. They said she rang a bell at midnight to summon the spirits, and again at 2 a.m. to send them away. They said she believed the ghosts of everyone killed by a Winchester rifle were hunting her, and that the only way to confuse them, to keep them wandering and lost, was to never stop building. Some decided she had lost her mind. Others were sure she was strangely clever. A few suspected she might be both at once. What is known as this: Sarah Winchester inherited a fortune worth roughly $500 million in today's money. She used it to create a house that defied logic. A house that grew and twisted and folded in on itself for nearly 4 decades. A house that, by the time she died, had become one of the strangest structures ever built in America. The work never stopped. Day crews hammered and sawed under the California sun. Night crews worked by lamplight, the sound of their tools echoing through the orchards. Neighbors said you could hear the hammering at all hours. Some said it sounded like a heartbeat. Sarah reportedly slept only a few hours a night. Servants said she wandered the halls in the dark, checking rooms, testing locks, listening. For what? They did not know. Maybe for footsteps that were not hers, maybe for voices, maybe for the kind of silence that feels like something held back. The house became a labyrinth. 160 rooms at its peak, 40 staircases, 10,000 windows, 2,000 doors. Some led to ordinary places. Others led nowhere. A closet 3 inches deep, a chimney that stopped short of the roof, a door on the second floor that opened directly onto a 15-foot drop into the garden below. Visitors who came to call, and there were fewer and fewer of them as the years went on, said the house felt wrong. Not haunted in the way ghost stories usually sound. Just wrong. Like walking through a fever dream. Hallways that doubled back on themselves. Rooms that seemed to shift when you were not looking. But Sarah kept building. She kept the workers employed. She kept the house growing. And she never explained why. To understand why, you have to go back. Back to New Haven, Connecticut. Back to a young woman who married into one of the wealthiest and most controversial families in America. Back to the rifle that made it all possible. Back to the beginning. Chapter 2. The rifle that built an empire. The Winchester rifle did not look like much at first. A simple lever action design. Wood stock, metal barrel, a mechanism that let you reload faster than any gun before it. But that speed changed everything. Before Winchester, a soldier or settler had to stop, fumble with powder and ball, reload one shot at a time. The Winchester let you fire again and again without pause. 15 rounds in some models. You could clear a room, hold off a raid, or hunt game without ever lowering your weapon. The marketing was ruthless and brilliant. The gun that won the West. Posters showed cowboys and frontiersmen rugged and free, Winchester in hand. It became a symbol of American expansion, of manifest destiny, of progress. It also became a symbol of death. Native American tribes facing Winchester repeaters in the hands of the United States cavalry. Bison herds, 60 million animals, reduced to near extinction. Many shot with Winchesters by commercial hunters. The Civil War. Range wars. Outlaws and lawmen both carried them. The rifle was everywhere, and everywhere it went, people died. The Winchester Repeating Arms Company made a fortune. By the 1860s, Oliver Winchester Hainscott, the company's founder, was one of the richest men in America. His son, William Wirt Winchester, inherited the business, and William married Sarah Lockwood Pardee in 1862. Sarah was 23 years old, small, barely 5 feet tall, with dark hair and serious eyes. She came from a well-respected Connecticut family. She was educated, fluent in multiple languages, and an accomplished pianist. Friends described her as thoughtful, shy, deeply religious. She married into wealth she could not have imagined. The Winchester mansion in New Haven was grand but tasteful. Dinner parties, charity events, the kind of life expected of a family with new money trying to prove they belonged among old money. Sarah played her role, the quiet, proper wife, the dignified daughter-in-law. But there was a weight to it. The rifle was never far from conversation. Every dress, every chandelier, every servant's wage, it all came from the same source, a weapon, a tool designed to kill as efficiently as possible. Sarah never spoke publicly about how she felt about that, but people close to her said she was uncomfortable with it, that she asked questions, that she struggled with the contradiction of living in comfort built on violence. Then, the funerals began. First, in 1866, Sarah gave birth to a daughter, Annie Pardee Winchester. A healthy baby, bright-eyed and small like her mother. Sarah poured everything into her, all her love, all her hope for a future that might feel lighter than the past. Annie lived 6 weeks. She died of marasmus, a wasting disease, likely caused by malnutrition or an inability to digest milk. The doctors could do nothing. Sarah held her daughter as she faded. The grief was absolute. Sarah withdrew. She stopped attending social events, stopped playing piano. Friends said she barely spoke for months. William tried to comfort her, but the loss lived between them, like a shadow. They never had another child. 15 years later, in 1881, William contracted tuberculosis. He weakened slowly, coughing blood, losing weight, fading in the same grand house where they had once held dinner parties. Sarah nursed him, watched him die. She was 43 years old, a widow, childless, and the sole heir to a fortune built on 50,000 deaths. Chapter 3. The Medium and the Message. Sarah could not sleep. Night after night in the New Haven mansion, she lay awake in rooms that felt too large and too empty. The silence pressed down on her. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like footsteps. Every gust of wind against the windows felt like someone trying to get in. Her friends worried. Her family tried to help. But grief like that does not respond to polite concern or well-meaning advice. Sarah was drowning, and she was looking for anything at all, that might explain why God had taken everything from her. This is where spiritualism stepped into her life. In the 1880s, America was obsessed with the dead. Seances filled parlors across the country. Mediums claimed they could reach across the veil and bring back voices, messages, proof that death was not the end. It was part comfort, part spectacle, part desperate hope dressed up as ritual. For people like Sarah, educated, religious, but shattered by loss, spiritualism offered something the church could not: the possibility of contact, of answers, of hearing her daughter's voice one more time. The details vary depending on the source. Some say a friend brought Sarah to a medium in Boston. Others insist it happened in New Haven. A few accounts claim Sarah sought out the medium herself, traveling in secret, unwilling to let her family know how far her grief had taken her. What most stories agree on is this: the medium told Sarah she was cursed, not by God, not by fate, but by the spirits of everyone killed by Winchester rifles, thousands of them, tens of thousands, Native Americans, soldiers, settlers, hunters, all of them restless, all of them angry, and all of them drawn to the family that profited from their deaths. The medium reportedly told Sarah that the spirits had already taken her husband and child, and they would take her too, unless she did something to appease them. She had to move west. As far from New Haven as she could go, she had to buy a house, and she had to build constantly, without stopping, because as long as the house was unfinished, the spirits would be confused, forced to wander, distracted, unable to find her. The moment construction stopped, the medium said, Sarah would die. Most people would have dismissed this as nonsense, the ravings of a charlatan preying on a grieving widow. But Sarah did not dismiss it. She listened. And whether she believed every word or simply clung to a structure that gave her grief a purpose, the result was the same. She made a decision. In 1884, Sarah sold the New Haven mansion. She packed her belongings, said goodbye to the life she had known, and boarded a train heading west. She did not tell most of her family where she was going. She simply left. She traveled across the country, through farmland and prairie, over mountains and desert, until she reached California, the edge of the map, the place where America ran out of land and met the sea. In San Jose, surrounded by orchards and fog, she found an unfinished farmhouse, 8 rooms, 2 stories. Nothing special at first glance, just a wooden structure sitting on 40 acres of fruit trees. She bought it, and then she hired carpenters. The work began in 1886, and for the next 38 years, it never stopped. Chapter 4. The House That Never Sleeps. The hammering started at dawn. Carpenters arrived at the San Jose property and found plans waiting for them. Sometimes there were sketches on brown paper. Sometimes there were only verbal instructions delivered by the head foreman. Sometimes there was nothing at all, just orders to tear down what they had finished yesterday and start again from scratch. They worked until sunset. Then, the night crew arrived. This was not how normal construction worked. Most building projects operated only during daylight hours. Materials were expensive. Labor was costly. Working at night by lamplight and candlelight was inefficient and dangerous. But Sarah did not care about efficiency. She cared about continuity. The house had to keep growing, day and night, every single day. Workers described a strange rhythm to the job. Some days they would frame out an entire bedroom, complete with windows and a door. The next morning, Sarah would decide the room needed to be somewhere else. They would dismantle it board by board and rebuild it 20 feet to the left. On other days, they would construct a staircase that rose 7 steps, turned at a landing, and dead-ended into a ceiling. They would ask the foreman if this was a mistake. He would shrug and say that those were the orders. Doors were installed that opened onto blank walls. Cabinets were built only 1 inch deep, decorative, useless, like props on a stage. A chimney rose 4 stories and stopped just short of the roof, venting into the attic instead of the open air. Windows were placed at floor level, staring into other rooms rather than outside. None of it made sense, but the paychecks always cleared. And in an era when work was uncertain and wages were often delayed or never fully paid, that mattered more than logic. Sarah paid in cash, weekly, on time. She also fed the workers, hot meals prepared by her kitchen staff, and carried out to the scaffolding and work tables. In the 1890s, during economic depressions that left families hungry and desperate, this job was not just employment, it was a lifeline. The men stayed, and they kept building. Sarah herself remained mostly hidden. She moved through the house at odd hours, inspecting work, leaving notes, changing plans. Servants said she rarely slept more than a few hours, that she spent much of the night walking the halls, alone, listening to the shifting bones of the house. One worker reportedly glimpsed her once through a window. A small figure dressed in black, standing in an unfinished room, staring at the walls as if reading something written there that no one else could see. The house grew. 8 rooms became 20. 20 became 40. Wings extended in multiple directions. Towers rose. A grand ballroom was added, then sealed off and never used. A conservatory appeared with stained glass windows imported from Europe. A kitchen was fitted with modern appliances that were cutting edge for the time. But the oddities multiplied faster than the normal rooms. A door on the second floor opened directly onto empty air over the garden. No balcony, no staircase, just a 15-foot fall onto brick pavement. A tiny staircase, with steps only 2 inches high, rose slowly over 44 steps to climb a little more than 9 feet. Switchback hallways looped endlessly, designed, it seemed, to confuse anyone trying to walk from one end of the house to the other. Local newspapers started paying attention. The Winchester Mystery House, they called it. The mansion where the widow kept crews working day and night on a building project that made no sense to anyone outside the gates. Reporters tried to interview Sarah. She refused. Guards were hired to keep trespassers off the property. The gates stayed locked. The orchards formed a quiet, leafy wall between the road and the growing maze of turrets and gables. But the rumors slipped through anyway, and they were about to get much darker. Chapter 5. The Seance Room. Deep inside the maze, there was a room Sarah visited every night. The servants called it the Seance Room. A small, unremarkable space tucked away in the center of the house, where no outside walls touched it. No natural light reached it. You had to know the route, through a specific hallway, past a door disguised as a cabinet, down a passage barely wide enough for one person. Once inside, the room felt wrong. 13 hooks lined one wall. No one knew what they were for. No coats ever hung there. No tools. just 13 iron hooks evenly spaced, holding nothing at all. A single entrance, but 3 exits. One door led back the way you came. Another opened into a different hallway entirely. The third led to a drop, a false door that, if opened carelessly, would send you tumbling into a storage room 8 feet below. In the center of the room sat a cabinet. Inside, reportedly, Sarah kept robes and objects used in her rituals. What kind of objects the servants would not say, or did not know. A bell system connected this room to Sarah's bedroom. 2 bells. One rang at 2 in the morning, the hour when Sarah believed the veil between worlds was thinnest. That bell summoned the spirits, or summoned Sarah to meet them. Accounts differ. The second bell rang at precisely 2 in the morning again in some versions of the story to send the spirits away. 13 chimes. One for each hook on the wall. Workers who stayed late claimed they heard the bells, heard footsteps in the hallways afterward, heard Sarah's voice, faint and muffled, as if she were speaking to someone in a language they could not quite make out. But no one ever saw what happened inside that room. Sarah never explained it, never confirmed or denied the seances. The only hints come from servants who worked in the house for years, and even they offered fragments, not facts. One housekeeper reportedly said Sarah spent hours alone in the seance room, sometimes sitting in complete darkness, sometimes lighting candles that burned strange colors. Another said Sarah received instructions during these sessions, architectural plans, directions for the next phase of construction, warnings about which rooms to avoid. Whether Sarah truly believed she was communicating with the dead, or whether the seance room was simply a place where she could retreat and grieve in private, we do not know. What we do know is this: the room was real. It still exists. Tourists can visit it today, though the hooks are gone and the bell system has long since been disconnected. And we know the house kept changing based on decisions Sarah made in the night. Rooms that were finished one week would be sealed off the next. Entire wings that took months to build were suddenly closed, doors nailed shut, furniture removed, as if something had happened there that Sarah wanted to forget or contain. The workers learned not to ask why. They learned to follow the new plans, even when those plans seemed to contradict everything they had been told the day before. Because the alternative was losing the job, and no one wanted to lose this job. The house was growing faster now. 40 rooms became 60, 60 became 80. The structure sprawled across the property like a living thing, swallowing the orchards, casting long shadows. And at the center of it all, every night at 2 in the morning, a bell rang in the darkness. Chapter 6. The Architecture of Confusion. If you had walked into the Winchester House in 1900, you would not have made it 10 feet before getting lost. The front door, when Sarah bothered to use a front door at all, opened into a hallway that immediately split in 3 directions. Each path looked identical. The same wallpaper, the same lighting, the same wooden floors that creaked under your weight. Pick the wrong direction, and you would find yourself walking in circles, literally. Some hallways looped back on themselves, laid out, so that anyone following them would end up exactly where they started, convinced they had traveled much farther. Other hallways dead-ended abruptly. You would turn a corner expecting another passage and instead face a blank wall. No door, no window, just wallpaper and silence. The staircases were worse. One rose 44 steps to climb only 9 feet. Each step just 2 inches tall, so shallow you barely lifted your foot. Sarah reportedly built it this way because of her arthritis. The gentle incline was easier on her joints than a normal staircase, but to visitors unfamiliar with the house, it felt surreal, like climbing forever without getting anywhere. Another staircase rose 7 steps turned at a landing and slammed directly into the ceiling. No attic access, no hidden door, just wood and plaster. The workers had built it, then stopped, waiting for further instructions. The instructions never came. The staircase stayed. Doors were everywhere, 2,000 of them, according to later inventories. Some opened into ordinary rooms, others opened into walls. A few opened into other doors. You would turn the handle, push, and find yourself face to face with the back of another door just inches away, sealed shut. One door on the second floor opened onto nothing, a straight drop into the garden below, 15 feet down onto brick pavement. No railing, no warning, just a threshold and empty air. Why build a door like that? Some say it was a trap for the spirits. They would chase Sarah through the house, burst through the door, and fall. Others say it was simply a mistake, a doorway meant to lead to a balcony that was never built. But Sarah never had it removed. It stayed. Like everything else that made no sense. Windows faced windows. You could stand in one room, look out a window, and see directly into another room across a narrow courtyard. No privacy, no view of the outside world. Just glass staring at glass. Some windows were installed at floor level. You would walk into a room and nearly trip over a pane of glass, set flush with the floorboards, offering a view down into the basement or up into the rafters, depending on which floor you were on. The ballroom was perhaps the strangest space, grand and beautiful, with parquet floors and stained glass windows worth thousands of dollars. 2 pipe organs. Sarah loved music and reportedly played alone at night. Space for 100 guests. But Sarah never held a ball, never invited anyone. The room was built, furnished, and then abandoned. Servants said she walked through it sometimes, late at night, trailing her fingers along the walls. But she never played the organs when anyone else was in the house. The stained glass windows in the ballroom featured spider webs. Intricate, beautiful designs of webs glistening with morning dew. Spiders appeared throughout the house, actually. Carved into woodwork, embedded in tile work, woven into iron grates. Sarah reportedly believed spiders were good luck, that they trapped evil spirits the way they trapped flies. So she filled her house with their images, creating a web made of wood and glass and stone. But the web was not just decorative. The house itself had become a web, hallways tangled, rooms layered on top of rooms, passages twisted back on themselves until even the people who built them could not always remember the route. By 1906, the Winchester House had grown to over 100 rooms, 7 stories at its tallest point. Towers rose above the orchards, visible from the road. It was the largest private residence in California. A mansion that rivaled the estates of railroad barons and silver kings. And then, on April 18th, at 5:12 in the morning, the earth moved. Chapter 7. The earthquake that changed everything. The shaking started without warning. San Francisco, about 60 miles to the north, took the worst of it. Buildings collapsed, fires erupted. More than 3,000 people died within minutes. The Great Earthquake of 1906, magnitude 7.9, became one of the deadliest natural disasters in American history. But San Jose felt it too. At the Winchester House, the ground rolled like a wave. Chimneys cracked and toppled. Windows shattered. The 7-story tower, the tallest structure on the property, groaned and swayed, and then it fell. Tons of wood and brick crashed through the floors below, punching through room after room until the debris settled in a heap of splintered timber and broken glass. Dust filled the hallways. The house creaked and moaned as if the entire structure might collapse. Sarah was inside. She had been sleeping in a bedroom on an upper floor. Accounts differ on exactly which room, because Sarah moved her sleeping quarters frequently, never staying in the same place for more than a few weeks. When the shaking started, she tried to reach the doorway. Standard advice during an earthquake: find a frame, brace yourself. But the door would not open. The house had shifted. The frame had warped. Sarah pushed, pulled, threw her weight against the wood. Nothing. She was trapped, alone in the dark with the building tearing itself apart around her. Servants heard her calling. They grabbed tools and crowbars, forced their way through debris-choked hallways, and found the jammed door. It took nearly an hour to pry it open. When they finally pulled Sarah out, she was shaken but unharmed. Physically, at least. Emotionally, something had cracked. Sarah walked through the damaged house in silence. She saw the collapsed tower, the shattered windows, the rooms buried under rubble, walls split open, exposing the skeleton of beams and studs underneath. The workers expected her to order repairs, to rebuild the tower, to restore what had been lost. Instead, she told them to seal it off. The entire front section of the house, 30 rooms, including the tower and the main entrance, was closed. Doors were nailed shut. Hallways were blocked with furniture and boards. Sarah never entered those rooms again. She did not explain why, but the servants thought they understood. The earthquake, Sarah believed, was a message, a warning from the spirits. She had displeased them somehow, built something wrong, invited the wrong kind of attention. The collapse of the tower was not random. It was punishment. So she sealed the damage like a wound, left it frozen in time, and moved the construction to other parts of the house, as if starting over, trying to appease forces that could shake the earth itself. The building continued. But it was different now. Before the earthquake, the house had a certain chaotic energy. Strange, yes, but also ambitious. Towers reaching skyward, grand rooms. A sense that Sarah was creating something immense, even if no one understood what it was. After the earthquake, the house turned inward. New rooms were smaller, hallways narrower. The construction focused on additions that sprawled horizontally rather than vertically. Wings that extended across the property instead of rising into the sky. As if Sarah no longer trusted height, as if she wanted to stay closer to the ground, she also became more reclusive. Before 1906, Sarah occasionally interacted with workers, left instructions in person, walked through finished rooms to inspect the work. After the earthquake, she retreated almost entirely. Days would pass without anyone seeing her. Instructions came through intermediaries. Cash appeared in envelopes. The foreman managed the crews. The housekeeper managed the staff. And Sarah moved like a ghost through her own house. Neighbors reported seeing lights in the windows at strange hours. A single candle flame moving from room to room, floor to floor, as if someone were searching for something they had lost. The seance room bell still rang at 2 a.m. Workers still heard footsteps, but now there was something heavier in the air. A sense that the house had been marked, that the collapse was not just structural damage. It was proof. Proof that Sarah Winchester was right to be afraid, and proof that no amount of building would ever be enough. Chapter 8. The workers who stayed. Most people would have quit. The earthquake had nearly killed their employer. The house was a maze that made less sense every day. The work was repetitive, bizarre, and seemingly endless. Build a wall, tear it down, build it again somewhere else. But the workers stayed, not because they believed in ghosts, not because they understood Sarah's vision. They stayed for something simpler, and in their world, far more real. Loyalty earned by steady pay and unusual kindness. Sarah Winchester paid better than almost anyone else in the valley. A skilled carpenter could make $2 a day working on farms or public buildings. Sarah paid $3, sometimes more for specialized work, and she paid every week in cash, without fail. No delays, no excuses. No quiet wage theft, a common practice in an era when employers often found reasons to dock pay or withhold it entirely. She also fed them. Every day at noon, the kitchen staff brought out hot meals. Not scraps or leftovers, but full plates, roasted meat, vegetables, fresh bread, coffee. In the winter, there was soup. In the summer, cold lemonade and fruit from the orchards. For men who often went home to sparse dinners, this was not a small detail. Some workers later said the midday meal at the Winchester House was the best food they ate all week. Beyond wages and food, there was something even rarer: security. The 1890s saw multiple economic depressions. Banks failed, businesses closed, construction jobs dried up for months at a time, leaving families desperate. But the Winchester House kept building, through panic, through recession, through hard winters when most projects shut down. Sarah's house never stopped. Men worked there for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. Some brought their sons when the boys were old enough to swing a hammer. Fathers and sons, side by side on staircases to nowhere and doors that opened into walls. They did not understand the project, but they understood the paycheck. And in an era of brutal economic instability, that was enough. One worker, a carpenter named John Hanson, later told a reporter that the Winchester job saved his family. His wife had been sick. Medical bills piled up. Other employers would have let him go. A sick family meant missed days, distraction, unreliability. But Sarah did not fire him. Instead, she quietly increased his pay and told the foreman to excuse him when he needed to go home early. No long explanations required, just a simple acknowledgement that life was hard and people needed room to deal with it. Hanson worked on the house for 18 years. Stories like his were common. A laborer whose child needed surgery. Sarah paid for it. A plasterer who broke his arm and could not work for 2 months. Sarah kept him on salary anyway. An elderly maintenance man who could barely climb ladders anymore. Sarah gave him lighter duties instead of pushing him out. This was not charity staged for the public. Sarah never advertised her kindness, never called the newspapers. She simply took care of the people who took care of her house. The workers noticed, and they protected her in return. When reporters came sniffing around, asking questions, trying to peer through windows or climb fences for a glimpse of the mad widow, the workers turned them away. When neighbors gossiped about strange lights and midnight bells, the workers shrugged and kept their opinions to themselves. They built her maze. They followed her impossible instructions. And they kept her secrets. Some of them likely thought she was eccentric, maybe even unwell. But she was their eccentric, unwell employer, and she treated them better than anyone else ever had. So when Sarah asked them to build a staircase that went nowhere, they built it. When she asked them to install a door in the floor, they installed it. And when she asked them to seal off 30 rooms and never speak of what they had seen inside, they sealed the rooms and stayed silent. By 1910, the house had grown to over 160 rooms, the largest it would ever be. A sprawling, impossible structure that employed dozens of people and baffled everyone who saw it. But for the men who built it, the Winchester House was not a mystery. It was a job, a good one. And in a world that offered so few of those, that was enough. Chapter 9. The Widow the World Wanted to See. The newspapers could not resist her. By 1910, Sarah Winchester had become exactly the kind of story that sold papers. A reclusive widow, a vast fortune, a house that made no sense, and best of all, rumors of ghosts, curses, and midnight rituals. The San Francisco Call ran the first major story, Mystery House of Santa Clara Valley, the headline read. The article described a mansion built by a woman who fears the spirits of those killed by her family's rifles. It mentioned sealed rooms, endless construction, and